Hi, welcome you guys. My name is Regina McCombs. I am an associate director at the Minnesota Journalism Center. I am here with a number of my colleagues, Meg Martin, who is another associate director, and Gail Golden, who you all know as Gigi, and Ben Toff, who's the director of the Journalism Center. So yeah, go ahead and say hello to everyone, please, and we will get started here. I want to introduce our guests today. They are Matt Adams and Laura Duclos from the Texas Tribune, and Kaila White from Minnesota Public Radio are one of our members of the Journalism Alliance of Minnesota, which is we're testing out the name. For our public and nonprofit network, which is funded by the McKnight Foundation. So we thank them for this. So yeah, keep introducing yourself in the chat, please, so we can say hello to everyone who's here. And we're going to get started with Ben, who has been doing some research on young people and the news and some things and the experiments that both NPR and their Reverb team have been experimenting with, and the folks at the Texas Tribune as well. And he's going to talk about some of the early things that they have learned. So Ben, take it away.
Thanks, Regina. Yeah, so I'll present a little bit of this research, a couple of different projects that have involved both NPR and the Texas Tribune. But really, I think our goal with this is to have a conversation among, those on the call, and I expect there'll be some more that are trickling in who are just not like Minnesotans and usually come to everything early, but are like journalists and come to everything late. But I'll get started. I'm going to try to keep it brief. I have a lot more detail than I will actually cover in these slides. We are planning to write up some of these results and make them available both for academic audiences, but also for journalists. And so there's a lot of material in these slides that I'm going to try to go through fairly quickly, but really so that we can eventually get to more of a conversation among those who are here today, because I think that's really the value of this conversation. So I'll start with a little background about what we did here. We did two different studies, actually, in the course of 2024. We did a randomized field experiment where we were looking at the impact of following this kind of content on Instagram and TikTok, but specifically NPR's Reverb content on Instagram, which we'll talk more about in a minute. And then we also did a series of focus groups with young adults trying to understand their own habits, their expectations around news delivered in these spaces, their preferences and attitudes about this kind of content. So I'm going to say a little bit about the impact study, and then I'm going to spend more time talking about the focus groups. The impact study, we recruited people from Minnesota, specifically 143 people working with an agency where they screened for people who regularly use Instagram, specifically, did not currently follow NPR News, but regularly said that they use the platform to get news. At least most of them regularly said they use the platform to get news. And what we did was randomly assign half of that sample people to follow NPR News on Instagram for about a 1-month period around the US presidential election. And we actually had them tell us their Instagram handles so that we could try to go in and verify they actually started following NPR. Michael Olson from NPR actually helped us try to verify the ones that we couldn't, where they had privacy settings. But for the most part, we're pretty sure they actually did. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with Reverb, we'll have Kaila will tell us more about the content itself. But they've been producing a lot more of this content in the last year or so. And so what we were really interested in is what kind of impact on this kind of audience it might have to actually follow that stuff. So we surveyed both groups, both before and after the election. The one caveat here is that we didn't have any control over whether they would see the content. All we could control is asking them to follow NPR. We don't really know whether they would. It turns out we're pretty sure that they actually did see it for a fair amount, and we had some positive effects of it. And the main finding that I wanted to highlight is just this fairly significant increase in trust towards NPR news specifically, that we know because of the design of the study is specifically from following them. That's really the only thing that was different between the treatment group and the control group. And it's a fairly sizable effect too. This is a scale from, I think, -2 to 2, and so it's almost a half a point increase in trust. Um, there was also some increases in things like agreement about statements like, I recommend NPR News to my friends, I prefer NPR News to other local news outlets, I feel attached to NPR News, or I consider myself loyal to NPR News. And so, again, in line with the notion that following this content had this kind of positive effect on people's attitudes towards the organization. Um, a big part of this, I think, is a matter of familiarity and about the organization among people who are in that treatment group. There was a big decrease in the percent who said that they just hadn't heard enough about NPR News to know whether they could trust it or not. Where there wasn't any change among the control group who wasn't assigned to follow them. And so that's definitely a big part of it, although it's not only that. Even when you exclude that aspect of the responses, you still found these significant effects. And obviously, it's not just a matter of seeing content from a news organization, but there's something about the content that they were seeing from NPR that was increasing this trust. And so, but we don't have ability to get that from the impact study. But I think we have a little bit better ability to get that through the focus groups we did. And so that's kind of why we did these two kinds of data collections. So the focus groups we conducted, we did 10 of them, 6 in Texas. We worked with the Texas Tribune to recruit young adults. Well, actually, again worked with a third-party agency to do the recruitment, but we worked with the Texas Tribune to schedule places where we could do these conversations in different cities where the Tribune was hosting events. So 2 in Houston, 2 in Austin, 2 in San Antonio, and then we did 4 in Minnesota here in this building upstairs. Again, with people under 35, regular users of TikTok and Instagram. In this case, we tried to balance them around whether they use platforms for news or not, along with other kinds of demographics, which were fairly evenly balanced to the communities that we were drawing from. Again, roughly the same time period around the election, about 5 to 8 per group. And in these conversations, we were trying to understand people's daily habits and routines around news in general and around using these platforms. And then again, trying to look at like what it is that they prefer or want to see from news delivered in these spaces, and what they pay attention to, and differentiating between trustworthy or untrustworthy sources of information in these spaces. And then, because we were working with the Tribune and with NPR, we also got specific examples of content created by the news organizations for these platforms that we could use as sort of concrete examples to elicit some reactions to and responses to. And I'm actually focus a little bit less on those specific reactions. I think we can talk more about that when we get to it. But I'm going to focus more on kind of more general themes around how this demographic, how this set of young audiences, what the specific appeal of getting information on these platforms really is. And just to give you an example of some of the of that concrete examples that we looked at, some of them were static images and text that both news organizations have experimented with. In other cases, they were video examples of or kind of more produced videos as well. So the Tribune example of a video about beekeeping from a specific story. This is a longer form video. NPR had this example of a piece about the North Star Promise program, where there's a reporter speaking directly at the camera. We had other versions of that kind of style of video, but they're kind of more like promo style videos from the Tribune, and a more humorous example from NPR as well. And we also had an example from the Washington Post TikTok guy. There's a political story. So we have a mix of kind of different formats as well that we were getting reactions to. All right, so as I said, I'm going to go through several of the things that we think are sort of indicative of the specific appeal of the platforms as a source for news information for this younger audience. less so about like the specific features of the formats. Although, as I said, we can talk a lot about that as well. And I'm going to skip past a lot of this because I want to get to the last two of these in particular. But essentially, we kind of focused on 5 areas that were specific appeals of the platform as like a way to get a source for discovery of information, the level of personalization that people came to expect from these spaces, as a tool for social connection, a tool for mood management, and then the user experience itself being a sort of pleasing, a big part of the appeal itself. And there's an asterisk there, as I'll get to in a minute, but is all of these things combined, and only some of this is about the content of the information they're getting. That's probably most in the first one, which is, when it comes to as a source for discovery, a lot of what people wanted were things that actually news organizations have long been, local news organizations in particular, have long been known for producing. So people would talk about things like using TikTok to find restaurants in their community, or other kind of more mundane things like finding out what's happening in your community locally, a street festival, and then planning their day around it. So things that I think we often think about or have long thought about as being a sort of function of local news is actually partly what people actually liked about what they were getting from the platforms themselves. Others, it was sort of more generally about like learning new things, getting knowledge, seeing things you would never see anywhere else, something you're never going to find on your own. It just kind of comes to you in a way, something you wouldn't even look for. Here's some random fact about this. Here's some funny thing about this. This is the sense of the platforms as a source for discovery that is part of its unique appeal that also, once upon a time, was what people really looked to their local news outlet for as well. And some of that was news. People did actually often say that they, more than I would have expected, so they appreciated getting news in these spaces, in part because they would say they didn't really get news anywhere else, and so they liked being alerted to when they did see news. They would know that it was worth paying attention to. Um, all right, I'm going to skip ahead. I think that the sense of how personalized it is something that probably most people have sort of already associated with these platforms. Um, and I guess the key point here is just the degree to which that's often in stark contrast to what people think about local news, that local news doesn't really make that direct impact connection to people explicit. And so it being part of the sort of gap that they felt like they weren't getting from a local news outlet, but that they did sort of expect from the platforms themselves. I'm going to skip past social connection as well, because I think that's also something more straightforward about the specific appeal of the platforms for this audience. But it was beyond just like using it as a way to keep up with each other. It was also like a way that they conversed with each other, sending TikToks back and forth, for example, and feeling like if you weren't in these spaces that you would be missing out. But I want to highlight these last two about mood management and user experience, because I think these are the two that are also, they have some of the most implications for news organizations thinking about creating content in this space. When it comes to mood management, a lot of what people talked about was that using these platforms way to pass the time, but an entertaining one, filling gaps in their day when they had nothing else to do, or when they were sort of bored, or filling awkward silences. It was a sort of a routine habit that they would pick up, and to that extent too, like they were not averse to using that time in a different way. It was just kind of an automatic way of filling that time. But it also was about a kind of emotional mood management piece to it. So a lot of people talked about using it in a way to turn their brain off, to just relax, using it at the end of the day to wind down. And I think that's an important piece of context to be thinking about in terms of when these audiences tend to be using the platforms. And so thinking about what that user experience is then going to be like in terms of what kind of information they're looking for in a space like that. They also talked about, the degree to which it was a kind of escapism or had a kind of numbing effect. Um, this Marsha and Austin um, talking about this is in the context of the election itself. It's been these past few weeks I've been really needing it. You don't want to drink, you don't want to do drugs. Your phone also has a numbing effect. I'm joking, but you know what I mean. It just kind of numb your brain. I'm going to look at 10 hours of dogs in pumpkin costumes or whatever's on there. So I think it's kind of become the new substance for escapism. I think this is one of the challenges for news organizations is like sometimes what people are looking for is to escape from content in the news when they're in these spaces. But um, uh, that doesn't mean that they're not looking for any kind of news whatsoever. Um, the other thing that really struck me was how much people were using um, the platform itself as because it was so addictive, as a way to reward themselves for like doing other tasks, um, as motivation for completing assignments, and then they go back to TikTok, for example, um, or as a way to you know to step away from whatever else was going on in their lives. And so that again, that kind of mood management piece of the way people are thinking about their own use of it, I think is important context. Again, in contrast to often the way that people are thinking about news these days, politics in particular being something that really stresses them out. Um, so specifically, political news is often something that they would say they would sort of scroll past and didn't want to raise their blood pressure, for example, as Robin put it. Um, Again, doesn't mean that they're not interested in it. It just means that the way in which they're interested in engaging with it in these spaces may not be the same as in some other contexts. And the last point I want to raise is just about the user experience itself, because this was a big part of the appeal, was not even necessarily about the content, but about the act of of engaging with information in this way. People found it easier to use. I mean, this kind of struck me. I wouldn't think that actually finding information in TikTok would be easier than Googling for information, but a number of people did say things like this, that they don't even bother using Google anymore. They just search for stuff in TikTok. And so this is increasingly, I think, for this generation, the way that they expect to find information is through that user experience, and being able to sort of flip through and scroll through video after video. And a lot of people liked that ability very efficiently to just skip through from one thing to the next, that scrollable option, as Naomi put it. Um, and that also means major challenges in terms of getting this audience off of the platforms. And it's partly because the platforms themselves really don't want to allow you to easily get off the platform. So including links is a huge challenge. And the link in bio that usually is the main strategy that news organizations often have used to try to get people to then follow up with more of that content. Pretty much universally, people would say, don't try to make me do that. It's too much of a barrier. I'm not interested in that. They do want the information to be packaged within the platform itself. On the other hand, that's very limiting. It's essentially a headline service, and there's only so much more information you can include. Um, but again, the user experience, the sort of easiness of getting information, flipping through and scrolling through information this way is what people were drawn to. And it's like the total opposite of that when they think about news, getting information from news organizations and news organization websites. Often thinking about this in the context of local news, where many local news outlets' websites are a terrible user experience. And so whether it's from encountering paywalls, as Lucy was talking about, trying to access news and then they were blocking her, was the term that she used, because she didn't pay for it, or other people just talking about the challenge of trying to get information from a local news website and the video doesn't load, or it's frozen, or it's ad city. I see more ads than the actual whatever they're covering. Instagram's just faster and quicker, and they're on there. They're typically, most of them, at least that's their perception. They'd rather stay in that environment to get the information in that kind of easy to navigate platform than going elsewhere. And when people did say they would go elsewhere, they would often say they would just Google for the story, and so it wasn't even necessarily following up with that organization, which may be the only organization that actually reported that story. So a few takeaways, and then I'll hand things over to my other presenters. The appeal of the platforms, the source of discovery, I think one of the big takeaways to me was how much what people were looking to discover was often the stuff that local news outlets do very, very well. Sense of place, things to do, interesting people, restaurant openings, slices of life. I mean, this is what local news organizations have long specialized in. And it's not that people want like radically different content, although there is a whole lot of like sort of mesmerizing visual stuff going on in TikTok. But in terms of the substance of the content, it's not like people wanted radically different things. They just wanted it in this place and in this format. And so I think there's an opportunity there for local news in particular. On the personalization side, I think that the main takeaway really has to do with the expectation that it's going to be that personalized. It's going to be very relevant to people's daily lives. And so the need to really make it explicit why this story matters to this younger audience, knowing that you're not just competing with the other local news outlets or other news outlets in general, but with like everything else that's on the internet that they may be encountering as they flip through one video every split second. Um, the social connection piece of this, I think the importance of thinking about the role, this is not just a distribution network for your content, but that it's part of uh, a social connection that you're establishing with this community. And so, and they're using the content to link to each other. And so there is that has to be part of the way that you're thinking about using the platform, because there is an expectation that the platform is serving that role. And so some of that comes out in terms of like expectation of engagement in the comments and responses to videos, but also in the way that you can expect the audience will be using those videos, sharing those videos with each other, that you're sort of cultivating a community rather than just distributing content out at people. Again, being mindful of the mood management piece of how people are using the platform. So how they're kind of curating their own emotional experience when they're using these digital spaces. And then again, thinking about that user experience, I think for news organizations, this is one of the biggest challenges is thinking through what is the simple pathway for those users to follow up, to get more information that's going to still be just as pleasing and easy to follow experience for them, that they're used to getting from the platform itself. It's not that people were averse to ever going outside the platform. It's just that they liked the sort of efficiency that they got from being able to scroll through and flip through things, and they don't feel like they get that elsewhere. But what comes with that is also the need to really focus a lot of attention on communicating your own brand identity. What is unique about you versus all the other content that they're seeing? What original reporting went into that story that isn't just, you know, what that local influencer might be providing? Because there's just such limited information that you're actually able to communicate in that space. And so I think there's more opportunity there for communicating that kind of background. And then the last parting thought I'll leave you with is a quote from, it's more of an extended excerpt from one of the focus groups in San Antonio, Penny. These are all pseudonyms, but Penny, at the very end of every one of these conversations, we asked people to imagine they were speaking directly to editors, publishers, local news outlets who really, really, really want to reach younger audiences in these spaces. What would you like them to know? And Penny went on a little bit of a rant, but I'll read you what she said. I feel like, no offense, having baby boomers and stuff try to relay a message to 15-year-olds, well, they're not voting, but 21-year-olds, stuff like that, is not going to work. I feel like a lot of people don't realize you kind of have to move with the social media times too. I think you have to find a short, effective way to deliver the news while also being statistical, because I feel like the more you get straight to the point, the better. As far as even doing these little articles and stuff, people are not reading. Literally, people are not reading. People are doing a lot of short form texting and stuff like that, and it's not even just pushing out these articles. You're not going to get people because people are not stopping to read them. People don't even stop to read captions anymore. She's referencing things that came up in that conversation about people saying the captions were too long to even bother reading them. How are we going to put out a whole news report when people don't even want to read a 2-paragraph caption? So I think more people have to come up with ways to have short form text, short form videos that will get straight to the point and also educate in a fast amount of time in a short amount of time. And I said, yeah, this is the crux of the issue. How do you do that and actually get people's attention? Somebody else, Nina, interjected, also get rid of newspapers. I don't even think I've read a newspaper, like an actual newspaper, and the fact that they're still advertising for it is a little, Penny said, for the older people. So this is the context. I mean, this is what the reality is for growing segments of this younger generation. This is both their expectation and their what they want to see from news. And it's not that they're uninterested in news. It's just that they are interested in getting it in the places, in the forums that they're used to getting information. And so I want to leave it there and turn things over to I think Kaila.
So I'd like to
Just
just
said.
take a little bit of time to
Sure.
ask questions of Ben. I don't want to take up too much time with that because I think we could spend the whole rest of the hour asking questions about this. But I did want to give a little space for one or two questions if anyone has something they'd really love to ask about the research. So this is actually set up as a discussion, so anyone can either just turn on your audio and ask your question, or you can throw it into the chat either way, and we'll throw those out. And if there are none, Ben has.
Well, hi, I'm Melody. I think the big question is what you just threw out there at the end, Ben, is like, I think most of us are news producers, is like, it's that big question is like, how do we produce ethical news, knowing that younger people want less information? So how do we do that ethically, within our own confines of what we want to produce as journalists? That's the big question that I have, and I'm just happy to hear more from the other presenters at this point. So that's how I'm feeling. And thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if it would be useful to hear from the other presenters talk about their strategies for doing that. I mean, I can say one of the tensions in these conversations was that, like, a lot of times people they recognize that they weren't going to get the whole story in the like short video or the sort of, that they were using it as a headline service, as a source of discovery of like where I could find out more about this thing. And but then the platform makes it really hard to actually like take that next step. And sometimes it could mislead people where they thought, like, because they have this expectation they're going to get like the basic outlines of the story, that when stuff didn't appear, that they were somehow being deceived or that they were missing important things. And it is tricky. I don't think anybody's quite solved it, but that's why I feel like it might be useful to hear like what the Tribune and what NPR has what their strategies have been to try to balance those things.
All right, let's go ahead and take that as our cue then. Kaila White is in charge of the Reverb program at Minnesota Public Radio News, specifically aimed at reaching those younger audiences. So, Kaila, why don't you tell us a bit about what you guys are doing, how you're thinking about it, what you're seeing?
Sure. Hey, everyone. So like she said, I am the founding editor of a team at NPR News creating news content for younger adults. I joined in September 2022, and Jane Helmke, who was our brand new executive editor at the time, asked me to just find ways to experiment with reaching younger adults. And so for the 2 months before that election that year, it was me, 2 part-time interns, eventually 1 contractor, so like full-time equivalent of less than 2 people, started experimenting with creating content about the election for younger adults, and then also on NPR News's new TikTok account that at that time only had 3 videos on it and no dedicated manager. And since then, we've grown. Right after that election, we pivoted and expanded to just creating content overall for younger adults and experimenting with social video eventually for all platforms. In 2024, the marketing department, we collaborated, and that's how we ended up with the name Reverb, because they wanted to brand our content as something distinct within NPR News, as a way to tell audiences like, hey, if you don't think NPR News is for you for whatever reason, here's this subgroup that is kind of speaking with a different voice and making different content. So as of the past year, it's been me, 2 reporter producers, 1 social video editor, and 1 digital producer. So about full-time equivalent of 4 employees. But we do collaborate with people across the newsroom. And why do this? You know, basically everything Ben was talking about, trying to reach people where they are and serve them in new ways. So I'll share just a couple slides to show what that has looked like at NPR News. We focus on digital content, but it's not exclusively that, because obviously we work in a radio first organization. But the main thing is we do conceptualize of stories from the beginning as multi-platform, and we have discussions up front about how to reach people on which channels, what each of those audiences needs, and how we can serve them distinctly on all those channels. I think a lot of times when people think about reaching young adults, they think about fun stuff. So they think about this, you know, often called like top of funnel work, or what Ben referred to as slice of life. Obviously, we do produce some of that. So when a bunch of the community was talking about gossip about whether or not Love is Blind was filming in Minnesota at the time, we made a video acknowledging that gossip. And that really blew up because I think in part we were giving credence to what people were talking about. And also the comments are a space for people to be in conversation with each other. So we really made videos and content as a place for people to talk with each other about their theories on this. I was very proud that our team broke the news that Timothée Chalamet was on the U of M campus. We decided to get that up as fast as possible so that it could reach the widest audience who wanted to go see him, thinking about how we can serve those people. This video on the Queen Spinner of Shell Shock, you know, she was someone who had gone viral on her own account for this really wild way she rides this ride at the Mall of America. But no news outlet had reached out to her. And so we wanted to be the first outlet to cover her. And we made a video thinking, well, we've seen her videos organically on TikTok. TikTok's algorithm is great about serving related content to people who showed interest in one video about a subject. And so we thought, how can we be the next video that someone gets served after seeing the Queen Spinners video? And so we did, and that actually to this day still brings us thousands of new followers all the time, because that is one of those slice of life videos. We think about how can we engage someone who's disengaged from the news. So when the day that Walz was picked as the VP candidate, we worked on not my team specifically, but like the important news, the major breaking news aspects. And then we thought, how can we also hook someone who doesn't care and just wants to know that this happened? And so that's why we did this roundup of memes and silly photos. And then this past like 2-3 months, I had my team really focus on the debut of the Love is Blind Minneapolis season, because that's one of those huge cultural moments that everyone shares and drives a ton of conversation. And we wanted to have we wanted for the brand to say, we're in conversation with you about this. So rather than taking an explanatory approach, that's like, you don't know what this thing is, and we're going to tell you what it is. We very deliberately created content that was, we know what it is, and we know what you know. And so we're in conversation with you about what's happening, and we're giving you even deeper exclusive content to help drive your conversations with your friends and family about this topic. But, you know, it's not only fun stuff that matters. Young adults care about serious things too. So I included that we also do a lot of content that is exclusive, sometimes investigative in nature, or attempting to package hard news for a social audience. So, you know, the most accessible way to get into social video is just producing videos that are B-roll with text on top. That's what this one on the left is. It's just... I don't even think that there's anyone speaking in this video to my memory. It's just B-roll from the scene of that funeral for the 3 Burnsville first responders who were killed on duty, with text on screen. And that is a video that we crafted thinking, okay, how can we tell the algorithm to serve this to people, not only in Minnesota, but people who care about law enforcement, knowing that you kind of have to niche down with social media and think about how can I tell the algorithm what's in this video so that it gets served appropriately. And that one did. Next to it, we have 2 stories that we broke. One is about an allegation of a PhD student at the U of M, being expelled over an allegation he used AI. we put a ton of time into that, but it's a topic that we knew is really important to younger adults and those who are in school who worry about this affecting them. And so we saw this as an opportunity to drive conversation on this topic. A second one is about a suicide cluster on the University of Wisconsin River Falls campus. Again, we knew that a community was talking about this, but no outlet had covered it. And so we wanted to be the source of truth for them. Another is this, as Ben was talking about, like a static image with text on this moment with Tim Walls and his son. We wanted to break that out as its own post because, social loves things that are emotional and people want to talk about their own experiences with gun violence. And so we thought, rather than having some roundup of everything that happened on stage with Tim Walls, we wanted to create a place where people could talk specifically about those topics in the comments. And then also adapting the kind of news coverage any outlet would do anytime about felons voting for the first time on election day after a new law took place. I love this comment that says, "Great coverage, NPR. Thank you for shining the light on this." We get those types of comments and they always really make my day. So this, like I referenced, we collaborated with marketing because our interests align in bringing in new audiences to NPR News. This photo is from an event that we hosted a couple weeks ago with 3 cast members from this season of Love is Blind who did not get airtime. That was a very deliberate choice. This was our first event that my team has ever hosted for NPR News, and we wanted to go with the angle again of you're hearing from all these other outlets about the main characters, but we also recognize that these people are our neighbors in Minnesota, and the way we can be distinctive is by inviting them to tell stories that you're not going to hear anywhere else. So that event was sold out and really fun, which is the big takeaway. Marketing did design a different logo for us, but they made sure that it says Reverb and it also says NPR News, similar to ways a lot of other outlets do. For example, like you might see NPR has Life Kit and they'll often brand those things together. And then they used the same kind of branding, but with more playfulness to it, I guess. And we have a landing page, not that anyone ever clicks on landing pages ever, but that is a place where we collect all of our work. I'm going to skip playing this, but our marketing actually did use our social content in advertising that was pushed to hundreds of thousands of people in 2024 as a way to show people, hey, we also are engaging in the social space with you. Okay. So I just wanted to give like a really top level overview of what my team does, but I'm happy to talk more. Or Regina, where do you want to go next?
Yeah, no, I definitely would like to leave some time for questions here for you guys to ask Kaila about what they're doing, what they've seen. So again, you can either put them in the comments or feel free to just pop in and speak up here.
I have a question that I don't think I've ever asked Michael about, but I'm curious, partly because you guys have made such a concerted effort to kind of market this whole initiative with Reverb and have sort of drawn a lot of attention to it very deliberately. Have you gotten any kind of pushback from the other elements of the NPR audience about this kind of work? Like, who don't perceive it as like something the organization should be doing or the right way to be presenting NPR, or like that kind of thing?
Of course, 100%. Anyone who works in social always sees those comments. We do get I mean, I wouldn't say it's a ton, but it is routine that we get those comments that are like, especially we don't always use a super casual tone, but we experiment with it where it makes sense. And especially on those videos, people will say like, I don't understand how this aligns with NPR. Or, on one of our pieces of Love is Blind content on Instagram, someone commented and was like, why is this brand so obsessed with this show? You guys never cover The Bachelor, so I don't know why you would cover this. But what I appreciate is that our audience is kind of self-regulating. So someone replied to that comment and said, clearly NPR News is focusing on this because it was filmed in Minnesota and they won't focus on other shows that weren't filmed in Minnesota. And I was like, thank you.
And how about within the newsroom? I can imagine there are people who are uncomfortable.
If they are, they don't talk to me about it. I think that we were really deliberate about Well, for one, with social, we've really standardized our approach to social over the past couple of years and professionalized it, and created a more unified brand voice. So if anything, I think people are pleased with that. We also are pretty deliberate because we want our social to be super accessible. We always talk about, like, if someone has never seen anything on this topic before, I still want them to be able to understand and have a takeaway from our social post on it. And so because of that, we don't really use insidery language or even really like meme-based or trending sound-based content, because I still think it requires having a fundamental understanding of internet culture. So I think because we haven't moved in that direction, we don't get a lot of pushback. We also like have made it a goal in terms of social video to collaborate with people across the newsroom. When we first started, like very much my team was only creating video within our team because that's what we had the capacity to do. But once we hired a full-time video producer, we wanted to I wanted her to collaborate with people across the newsroom. And so I think in 2023, we featured like 12 NPR employees on screen, and in 2024 it was like 25. So that has also been great with consensus building internally, is to bring people into the process and collaborate with them on scripting and on hosting and giving them feedback so that they can feel really confident about being part of our social. And then people get the feedback from the public, and I think it's really fun. So Faven Goreski, who is one of my reporter producers, said that one time she was in a conversation with another colleague and a young adult, and the young adult said to the other colleague, like, do you even work at NPR? Because I haven't seen you on their social media. So I think actually there's been more of an incentive to be part of the process.
Excellent. So Kevin Hendricks asks, do you repurpose other NPR content, or is it all unique for Reverb?
Yes. So I wasn't clear enough at the beginning. My job is like 50% editing and leading the Reverb team, and then 50% kind of your standard digital editor, audience editor type role. And so in that half, yes, we do repurpose stuff. When I say that we have a digital producer we work with, she's not even 100% Reverb. She works a desk shift like a normal digital producer. And she runs our Instagram. And so she's repurposing stuff from across the newsroom for Instagram all the time. In terms of actual specific Reverb content, no, I've only ever directed them to do original reporting. It's very rare for us to adapt like a shorter version of what someone else is doing. Or I guess, like I said, for videos, it's a collaboration, but go ahead.
No, I was just curious what kind of growth you've seen on the platform and what kind of sort of in general response from the audience you've gotten.
Yes. So we use a software called Rival IQ to track social. And in 2024, NPR News had one of the fastest growing and most engaging Instagram accounts among competitors. And that was consistent throughout the year. So I'm very proud of that. That also was the case for Facebook. And I think that's because Meta was really pushing Reels. So we were well positioned to capitalize on that because we had been experimenting with social video since 2022. Yeah, we've seen definitely like explosive growth, I would say, on Instagram. For TikTok, we had a really successful period for a while. And then with the election and just other experimenting with more serious news content in social video, TikTok has just not been loving it. So we referenced around the time of the election, like we were joking that we were in TikTok jail. We are kind of breaking out of it, but it has slowed a little bit there.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Well, I want to make sure we get time to talk with our folks from the Texas Tribune as well, Laura and Matt. Why don't you tell us about what you guys are doing and how you're experimenting in this space?
Yeah, thanks. And it's really great to be here. I'm Matt Adams. I'm the director of audience engagement and growth at the Texas Tribune. And I lead a team that Laura's on as our audience producer, who work on social newsletters and also short form video, which is very new for us. And it's great to be on this talk because NPR was someone that I worked with very early on with Twitter Spaces. I'm an NPR alum from the main headquarters, and when I was always trying to find new ways to try to interact with audiences. So I was very early on Twitter Spaces, and we did one with NPR as our first member station collab around the Derek Chauvin trial. So that was very interesting to try that out and just find a new way to kind of connect with audiences. So I've been at the Texas Tribune for about 2 years. And when I came here, we weren't doing a lot of short form video. We've been doing a lot of more long form video. We had a YouTube page that had some decent engagement on it, but a lot of documentary style videos. We were doing like 18 to 20-minute long docs. We weren't doing very short form video. We weren't on TikTok. We weren't doing anything of that nature because we just didn't have the staff at the moment. So a chance came where I was able to hire an audience producer to join us, who ended up being Laura, who had a great background and great skills in short form video. And she's really been leading the charge of us experimenting in this world and getting out there and trying new things. We have upped our game and doing more Instagram Reels. Over the last year, our Instagram has grown by over 15% in followers than where it was last year. And that is a thanks to not only the work we're doing with our cards, like Ben showed, our infographic cards, or our photos from our visual team, but also all of the reels that Laura is creating. That's really given us a chance to kind of like reach out and find a new way to interact with our audiences and new audiences when it comes to sharing a lot of the stories that we're doing at the Tribune that really are showing the impact that is happening across the state from the legislator or from the government that's affecting Texans. We are on TikTok now, but we are brand new to it, I'll still say. We didn't launch until December 2024. And I will also take the hit for being a director of audience and deciding, let's get on TikTok like a month before it went into a ban. That was our decision to make. But I think if I could give any kind of advice here is, I think when you're trying something new, Laura and I went back and forth a lot about like, if we got on TikTok, what would that be? Would we be funny? Are we going to do this? What's our personality going to be? And I think we just needed to get on it and just start experimenting. And Laura has a lot of great ideas about how to present a lot of our reporting and our work here on our TikTok and getting more of our reporters in front of the camera. And I think that's what helped us is we just got started and we just started running with it. And we're still experimenting. We're still trying new things. Like what NPR is running into. We've had videos that have hit and done really well, and we've had ones that haven't struck a chord yet. So we're still trying to figure out our strategy too and what that looks like. But if I have any advice for someone who's like, we don't know where to start or what to do with this, I would say just jump into it and just, learn a lot from these other news orgs and see what can make sense for you. We're not all going to be Dave Jorgensen. We're not all going to be Planet Money TikTok, but there's probably someone you work with who has an interesting personality or someone that you think would be good on camera that could explain all of the work that you're doing, your investigative work, or things that might be a little bit over their heads for younger audiences to explain it in a way that's going to make them understand what's happening. And it's something that we're just going to keep experimenting with as we move forward. We're seeing a lot of growth with our Instagram. Like I said, our TikTok is new, so we're still trying to grow there. But I do think short form video is still something to experiment with for newsrooms. I'm not calling this a full pivot to video. I know a lot of us went through that at other legacy orgs. But I think that I was just talking to Laura, seeing that slide from Ben. That was a really rough group chat that was happening about journalism, right? I don't want to read newspapers. I don't care. These articles are all over my head. I don't understand. Like, I do think attention spans are going to keep getting a little bit shorter, and we're going to have to find a better way to present some of these stories for younger audiences to really interact and to understand what's impacting them and how these stories are working. But I want to pass it to Laura. She's been doing the work, and I think she'll really give us more of a behind the scenes about her production and how she's been approaching some of these videos with our reporters.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me here. I love getting to spread the good word, I guess, of video, and I might be able to answer, more specific questions, but just kind of in general, I went to college to work in TV. It didn't work out for me, and then I just I went to J school and I switched over to digital video and I've been doing it ever since. And that was like the time when audience production was just becoming a thing. So like my first job was an audience producer focusing on video, like what I'm doing now. And at the time, the place I worked at was very big on like, we must have a face in the video. We must have a gray background at all time. And they were just like very like strict about their branding, about who they were, about what they talked about, and who they were trying to talk to. So at the time, the millennials were the younger people they were trying to appeal to, and now it's like Gen Z, Gen Alpha. And I think that for me, when I am making videos, and I feel like this also comes with like experience and like reading different kinds of things outside of your own work and just connecting them back. But if you think about these younger people that we're trying to connect with, you know, they've had it kind of rough so far, you know, like their youth was destroyed by COVID. You know, they are dealing with all these crazy issues that we as adults don't even know how to handle. And I think that I actually don't think that young kids and people who are saying like, I don't want to know, like this is too much for me. I don't actually think they don't want to know. I think it's just that everyone is so overwhelmed and overstimulated, while at the same time we have this like information discrepancy that keeps growing and growing. So that way the people who are trying to like promote false narratives, you know, it benefits them for people to not pay attention. It benefits them for people to not have critical thinking skills. And so I guess I'm saying all of that to say like, when I am making a video, I'm also keeping in mind teaching critical thinking skills and teaching empathy. And I think that that's been like a really big thing for us. I think that's what works for us. And I think that, you know, in those studies, whenever the reporters were on camera just being themselves, that was whenever it was most effective. And like Matt said, like we can't, you know, if I were like a few years younger, I could probably do the skit thing, but like that's just not really who I am anymore, and it's not really who the Tribune is. And so we've been figuring out how that looks. But you know, I recently started a series explaining how the legislative session works, and that is fun in its own way, and like it's fun in my way, and I'm the one making the video. So I think that that's like a big focus, and I've told Matt that before too. Like I don't want to be you know, Texas Tribune TikTok girl. I want to be Laura Duclos, who is a video producer and a journalist. So with that, I guess if you have any questions, I'll do my best.
Just saying we had the same conversations, and that's why we just started experimenting on TikTok, and we were posting like pretty much anything, especially because you start with no audience, and TikTok only every piece of content can hit or fail, and it doesn't really matter. So like that's why I think it's better to just iterate as well. And we also didn't do the skit thing because I'm like, good for them, but that's not our strength
Yeah.
either.
And I
I
think people,
will. Oh, no,
oh,
go ahead, Lauren.
I was gonna say, like Ben also mentioned, like people are kind of over it. Like, and I even think like Dave is over it. Like I think like if you look at his content now, like I think you know, and like you know the 15 or no, the one of the people said in the studies, you know, we have to keep up with the times, and like that era doesn't exist anymore. And I think that if newsrooms are trying to cling to that, it's gone. And I think the best thing you can do for yourself is be who you are. Like you went to school, you have this experience, you know what you're doing, and you just have to trust yourself. And I think that being confident in yourself shows these people on TikTok, you know, whatever. Sometimes you'll see videos where they'll be like, I have a degree in this, I have a degree in this, let me tell you about this. And then like that goes well, and that's all they need to know. So yeah, it's a mix of things. I would also say, weirdly enough, I've noticed that if you use scripts to not read off of a teleprompter app, that's a personal thing. I do find that there's a slight difference between like if I'm looking at the camera here and talking to you, and if I'm looking here and reading a teleprompter and talking to you. So I think people want you to be like talking to them. People want to see things and think about doing things, but they don't actually want to do the thing. So just kind of, I told Matt yesterday, like, I think it's more than just leading the horses to the water. You have to show them how to drink. You have to drink the water.
I just want to add very quickly as Laura's manager too, and this is for any managers in the room who are thinking about doing this and getting your team up for it. When we started this, Laura would pitch me ideas, and I'm like, I don't know if we should do that. I don't know if that's going to work. Because I'll be honest, like I'm an older millennial, but even like TikTok was something I kind of missed the boat on and didn't know this would be a place to share news. And then I was in other news orgs that are still trying to catch up. So I feel like she has a good finger on the pulse of like, no, like people are going to understand what this means or what this looks like. And I think I would really recommend newsrooms to be open to it. It's going to be experimental. It's going to be something different, but I don't think we can be in as audiences change and as, you know, where they're getting their news changes. I don't think we can play anymore into that role of like, oh, we just want to sit on the sidelines, or like, oh, that might hurt our brand. Like we have to think about how our brand is being accepted by different readers, but also where are spaces we aren't in that we can introduce ourselves and what that's going to look like too. And that maybe is picking up a whole new audience as well. So I love what Reverb's doing. I think that's very smart. I love they call it a street team. I think that's very, I've not seen that with a lot of things, but I I would really recommend for managers in the room or people who are thinking about strategy to, like, when you're younger, reporters and editors are pitching these ideas, be a little open to it, because they're the ones who are doing this like Laura's constantly on TikTok and sharing me videos and being like, look what they're doing here, and like studying different things that she's tried different features we've learned from other news orgs, and they've done well in our videos. So I've been trying to keep an open mind to that too. And you definitely want to figure out what your voice is going to sound like, but don't be afraid to, like, at least experiment and try. And I don't think it'll hurt anything just to get out there and see what it looks like for the first time. And then if it's not working, you can always try something else or go back to a different way that you want to do your approach.
All right, we've got time for maybe one or two questions here. Wow, I feel like we could talk about a lot of different things here, but anybody want to chime in with a question or two for these guys? I worry about things like the algorithm. You said trying things and you can always pivot, but I sort of worry that you have so little control over, I think, Kayla, I think it was you talking about being in TikTok jail. Do you have the opportunity to pivot, and how much does it take, I guess, to sort of make that happen?
Yeah, you can. I mean, you can. I think one thing we have found is often what hits on TikTok doesn't hit as much on Instagram or vice versa, but that makes sense because our Instagram audience is super Minnesotan, and like they are very much, we can see that they live here or they are connected, and they're in, and they also, the way Instagram serves things to followers is completely different from how TikTok really doesn't serve to followers. It's almost like TikTok is the top of the funnel where every piece of content is an opportunity to reach a brand new person. And Instagram is more middle-ish funnel where we know these people already follow, or if they're going to be served it and they don't follow us, it's probably because they have some connection to Minnesota because our content is so local. In terms of like getting out of TikTok jail, I mean, there's always the option to just pivot and only do really fun, lighthearted stuff, but I don't know, we're a news organization, so we want to do hard-hitting content too. So I think really a big lesson is just not to take it personally with the algorithms sometimes.
I think it's also a healthy reminder that you can be really, really nervous about what you're going to post, and then you post it and like it gets 60 views, when you're starting out. So don't put so much pressure on yourself and just do it. I think that took me personally like years to learn. And like in hindsight, I wish I would just have jumped more.
One thing I want to call out in terms of thinking about your audience is Melody Hoffman's on here with Southwest Voices, which is a hyper-local news outlet. And Melody, I think, does a great job on social of thinking of video and social posts that are also hyper-local. I still think about, there was all this conversation in one neighborhood because there was like some demolition or something. There was a huge hole in the street, and she was like reporting live from the hole. And I thought that was so funny and smart. I don't know, Melody, if you have tips about coming at this with a smaller team and making it hyper local.
Oh my, I think I was here to learn. Oh my gosh. From a smaller team's perspective, all of the ones that I'm thinking of, I had a friend or like a fan of Southwest Voices reach out to me and be like, hey, there's, there was like a sinkhole on a street, or somebody was like really obsessed with, we had potholes, a bunch of potholes, and they were like tracking them in their neighborhood. And I was like, oh, can I come out with you? And then somebody else was really obsessed with Lake Chipotle. And I was like, will you come with me to like help me film? So I think with smaller teams, I'm the editor. I am like the one person show, that I do have my own tripod, but if a neighbor or like a reader reaches out to you, if you can ask to like come with them, it makes it a lot more fun, and it just gets me going. And then it also adds to that community feel because you're out with a neighbor or a reader, and then it goes from there. So that would be it's not even my advice, it's just what happened.
Hey, that's classic audience engagement.
Yeah. And it really wasn't like, how can I get my audience to like me more? It was just, naturally what happened. So yeah, thanks. And I love doing it. So it's fun for me.
Great. Well, we are past our hour, but I do want to give people a chance to throw up their Instagram accounts or their TikTok feeds in the chat here, if you like, so we can all sort of see what everyone is trying and experimenting with. So go ahead and do that if you've got one you want to share with us. And while you're doing that, I will just thank our folks for the work they have done here and for everything that's going on. We will send around a link to this and to Ben's slides, right? Ben, we're going to share the slides.
Yeah, I can. And we're also planning to write up something a little bit more, I don't know, not in slide form, but in readable form about this work. There's a few different research papers we're putting together, but there'll be some public-facing versions of them as well.
Great. So yeah, so I just want to remind you guys all, we are the Minnesota Journalism Center. We are working on this project specifically for public and nonprofit media, although we're welcome for others to listen in. Our next event related to this is at Northern Exposure, which is a photo conference coming up April 4th and 5th that we have added a specific track for non-visual folks or for editors and things who are struggling with trying to figure out how to be better at visuals. So there's be a whole series of sessions around that. For those of you who are in this group, it is free. So you just register the code with the code MJC and you will get free admission. It runs Friday afternoon and Saturday all day. Friday morning we're running, but it's for students specifically, and you probably don't care about careers in photo. But in the afternoon and then all day Saturday, we have special things going on. We give you breakfast and lunch. And we've got some really, really fabulous speakers coming in to talk about this, people who really know a lot about how to make visuals really work for you. So I hope that some of you will join us for that. That's in person. Then in May, we will have another virtual event that we are working on getting set up now. And sorry, I lost my prompt screen when I pulled up the Texas Tribune's TikTok. Yes, so I'd like you to invite you to that. We'd like you to stay in touch. Let us know how we can help you. We are totally all about this, and we are working on sort of figuring out ways we can serve you guys best. So if you guys will leave the Zoom open for those of you who want to sort of catch all the links or do the see what else, but thank you guys all for participating. We appreciate you, Kaila and Matt and Laura and Ben, for the work you're doing. And we hope that you will join us again.